Hello everyone, thanks for tuning in today. For this video I'm going to be going over the top 5 mages, which are arguably the strongest class right now. So let's get right into that and see where they rank. For number 5, I'm going to be going with Librarian, but I would like to preface this with the fact that if you prefer to play the game for the PvE ranks, you're probably going to want to go with someone like Sapphire as opposed to Librarian, because Sapphire is a more useful crowd control mage in general, so she's going to be better at climbing things like the tower than someone like Librarian. However, since this list is mostly focused on PvP, I'm going to be sticking with this pick, mostly for the fact that she has a 100% chance to stun priests. However, even with this being said, unfortunately due to her speed, most priests are going to outspeed her anyways. So she's going to be kind of like a fallback strategy, where on turn 3 and 4, if she gets her volley off, she might be able to mitigate some of the healing from someone like Blowy, or some of the weakness exploits from someone like Psychic. However, she's not going to be that reliable on round 1 for this effect. However, she does have some other redeeming qualities, such as the fact that she reduces the attack of whoever she hits by 11%. So that does help her with some boss fights, as we were talking about in the Assassin video. When you reduce the attack of these bosses, since their attack is so high, this actually makes quite a big difference in those fights and can help you get a few extra rounds to get damage in. So that can go a long way, depending on what you're fighting. The fact that her skill damage is increased by 95%, while it seems good in theory, unfortunately 95% on skill damage is only okay. She can do some good damage with this attack, but again, because she's so slow, and because she doesn't really have a high base attack, unfortunately this is not going to be something that really ends the fight for late game teams. Now, if you manage to get Librarian up in levels while your server is still new, and if you have like a level 6 or a level 6-star or 7-star Librarian while the average is only 5 or 6, then you're going to be able to make a big difference with her, because just the natural stats she's going to get is going to make her seem very strong. I don't think she scales that well into the later parts of the game. Now, also the fact that her attack can reduce the crit of the enemy and increase her own attack does benefit her quite well. An 80% chance is kind of awkward because it will proc most of the time, but then when you're looking at long fights like guild bosses or friendship bosses, this will miss sometimes, and that's kind of annoying. But because it's on basic attack, chances are before the first one expires, she will proc it again, so that it kind of balances itself out. But overall, she just has kind of a weird kit that I don't really like, and I don't think many people do like it. Her main aspect is going to be the fact that she stuns priests, but because she's kind of slow, she has a hard time with that. So, let's go on to number 4, and that is going to be Gianna. And I might be saying that wrong, so sorry if I am in advance, but I think she is also one of the more underrated girls in the community right now. And basically what she does is, as your teammates die, she gains an incredible amount of attack and armor break. And what this makes her good for, specifically, is the varsity battles, because you can have just a team full of fodder, level 1 units that will die very quickly, and when it gets around to Gianna's turn, she'll just one-shot the enemies with her ability. And she also has the ability to silence warriors. Now that's not the most useful, but it's still a nice little perk considering she still does a ton of damage. That's great. She also increases her own attack by 30% when this hits, so if she does get a second volley, she's going to be even stronger than the first time. Plus, if any allies are dying, she's going to be benefiting from that as well. And then when she dies, she does 140% of her attack as damage. And this is not that impressive on paper, but if she's the last one to die and she's had a ton of these buffs proc on her, she can take out the whole enemy team when she dies. It's hilarious to see this when it happens, and it definitely can happen. So what you can do is you can actually have some strategies where if your opponent doesn't have a good healing girl, you basically throw 4 fodder units on your team, a Gianna, and then a tank that can survive, and just make them pure tanky, so something like Fencer would be great. And Eventually, Gianna's going to do a tremendous amount of damage to your opponents, and then when she dies, she usually finishes off the rest of them, and then someone like Fencer or Blood Elf can kind of just clean up the rest, or just survive for the rest of the fight, because chances are most of the enemy units are dead, and they just can't kill someone like Blood Elf or Fencer. They're just too tanky to be dealt with by one unit, unless that unit happens to be something like Hexa now. That's the only problem, is that if your opponent does have a Hexa against a strategy like this, all of a sudden, this is a crap strategy, because then Hexa's going to get a bunch of buffs from your opponents dying as well. But, as I mentioned in the Hexa video, she's also pretty soft, so Hexa is very likely to die to this strategy before she can take advantage of it. Alright, in number 3 is going to be Saint. And Saint is very much like Gianna, and you can use her in almost the same way. She's not quite as good in those suicide strategies, because the buffs that Gianna gets are better, and then when Gianna dies, she also gets that buff as well. Or when she dies, she does damage. So Saint isn't quite as good for that. However, Saint also gains power when an enemy girl dies, so she's much more useful in the typical PvP circumstance, because she's going to be getting attack no matter what's happening. Or not attack, sorry, but damage rather. Because when an enemy girl dies, she gains crit and critical damage. When a allied girl dies, she gains attack and skill damage. So no matter what happens, Saint is going to be powering up. And that is much more beneficial than simply having your units die. Because if your units are dying, unless you've specifically set it up to be that way, you might already be too far gone to be redeemed by something like a cheese strategy. However, Saint allows you to snowball a victory or a defeat, which is amazing. And that's why she's really considered one of the best. And I am still surprised, though, that she gets a lot of talk in her favor, whereas Gianna doesn't really see any, because they are very similar in that fashion, but undoubtedly Saint is better, and a lot of that also comes from the fact that she gets a ton of health, which is nice, a weird skill damage multiplier, and an attack multiplier, but it's not quite as good as Gianna's. But overall, you're probably going to see more damage from Saint on a general fight-by-fight basis, especially if you're already winning these fights, because of her ability to scale off of enemy deaths, which is just something you're looking forward to. You want to be winning the fight in the first place, as opposed to falling back on something like Gianna's passive, where if you're losing, she can help you pull ahead. Saint can do both, no drawbacks. Number 2 is going to be Amelia, and I think with the recent buffs especially, Amelia is one of the best units in the game, not just mages. She is incredibly strong, and unfortunately she is a demon, so that makes her harder to actually build up. However, if you're from VIP 7 to 8 in that area, and you're looking to make a rainbow aura, I don't think right now you can do any better than go for Amelia. Her crowd control is amazing. Having a 30% chance to petrify on ability, to steal energy, it's just so good. There's so many options here for what can happen. Either they're going to get petrified, or they're going to miss their ultimate, and then her basic attack does the same thing. She has a very high chance to petrify and steal energy, and this will just keep your opponents from doing anything. If you end up fighting against an Amelia who is built for speed and then has a energy antique on her as well, you will see what I'm talking about. This will it cripples teams. This is so detrimental when you're trying to fight against it, and you're just not able to attack due to petrify and due to energy drain. And she also swings pretty hard. She has the same thing as Librarian with a huge skill damage boost. Although, like I said before, that's not particularly amazing, but it is going to help her do the damage she's looking to do. Her base damage on her ability is a little low, but as her health gets below 50%, increases her attack by 180%. This is madness. Now, it does reduce her armor, so she does get taken down pretty fast when she hits this point. However, if she's allowed to get off any attacks, this gets ridiculous very quickly. So not only is she capable of completely crowd controlling the enemy team, but she can very easily kill 3, 4, 5 girls in one shot very quickly. She does tremendous amounts of damage once this passive procs. 180% attack is a lot. Now, even when built with speed gear and crystals and things of that nature, which is why I think she's one of the best. Her kit synergizes with the fact that she's fast by nature. You build her with more speed, so she gets beaten by very few girls, And then on top of that, if you do need damage, when she does get hit a few times, all of a sudden she can just go crazy and just level the opponent's team. Very underrated. I've seen a few tier lists on Facebook that put her in like tier 2, and I'm always curious as to how that's justified. Now, some of these might be old, and the buffs that came in recently might not be taken into account, and that's something everyone should note when you're looking at any tier list, my own included, is that you have to note the date at which these things were made. And that's why I kind of think it's a little bit iffy when people are sharing a lot of tier lists on Facebook, because you don't really get to see when these things were created. A lot of people don't put dates on them. So try to keep that in mind when you're looking at tier lists, especially if you're sharing tier lists. Keep that in mind, because you might be giving people false information unintentionally, such as Amelia being weak. She is not weak. She is one of the best units in the game, and as soon as you come across one that is spec'd in the way that I said, you will see that for yourself. Alright, number 1 is going to be super obvious, and that is Priestess. And again, you have to kind of preface this with you want multiple Priestesses on your team. Priestesses? Anyway. In order to allow all these marks. And that's where a lot of her damage is going to be coming from, is she's going to be getting these marks. She gets damage reduction, which is very good. This is unusual for mages to have things like this, like damage reduction, health bonus, and crit. This is very good stats. The only thing she's missing here is attack, but she makes up for it with the fact that these marks give her so much damage. And then she can steal attack as well. So again, she's good in PvP, she's good in PvE against bosses to help reduce their attack, and if you have multiple of them applying these marks all of the time, the damage is just insane. If you, again, it's very similar to Amelia, where it can be hard to look at some of these stats and say, okay, this is very obviously a damage-oriented champion. It's not that obvious when you're looking at someone like Priestess or Emilia, where their damage is so conditional. But if you have a critical damage setup on Priestess and a few of these marks start going out, all of a sudden your opponent is just going to get shredded. And she is not the easiest to kill because of her damage reduction, which is amazing. And the fact that girls like Amelia and Saint are so predominant is actually one of the biggest reasons why Dracula is so highly rated right now, as Dracula is one of the few girls that can put a stop to Priestess and things like that. Because of the 100% stun rate, Priestess is not the fastest. That's one of her few weaknesses, and because of that, she can be mitigated. However, if she is not directly stopped by someone like Dracula, or even something like a Psychic, then you're going to have a bad time trying to deal with the fact that there's so much damage going to be coming out of this girl. And that's really it, though. Priestess is not really a dynamic girl in the fact that she does a lot, except for the fact that she does a lot of damage. And that is mostly when you see 2 of them or more. Now, I have seen a lot of people saying that she's not good without 2 of them, and that just isn't true either. Her damage is still very high, even as a single girl on your team. But once you start to get 2 of them, or God forbid, if you find a way to get 3 of these things on your team, you just go berserk. It's very difficult to stop, very difficult to mitigate. Blowy is not going to heal through this, so you have to crowd control them. If not, you're going to lose. Plain and simple. Anyways, guys, let me know what you think in the comments below. Did I miss someone? Do you think that maybe I've overrated Amelia? Because I definitely feel like that might be a common sentiment. Although I feel as more people see her coming up now, that feeling is going to change over time. But anyway, guys, as always, thanks for watching and have a great day.